Well, this might be the first episode where I cry. I did just finish crying about 20 minutes before we pressed record. And I'm a big fan of crying. Big fan of crying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you love it.
I do love crying. I mean, I was going to say yesterday, last page we talked about some fun facts about ourselves, and everyone learned that me and my dad are both daily horoscope readers. Another fun fact about me is I love to cry.
No. Let's clarify what exactly you mean.
Well, I think I did even bring it up the last page in the context of crying with like patients and their families.
Mm-hmm.
In the context of not, like, I think if that flow is open, then it stops you from being like emotionally shut off. So I was talking about it in more of a work context, but I'm also just a fan of when you feel so compelled in life to cry for both happiness and sadness.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to just, let those feelings roll, baby. Let them come as they come.
And were you crying out of sadness just 20 minutes ago, or?
No, I was crying out of happiness. So we'll talk about how this episode was actually born, I suppose. I don't even know, like, we already have a page called Romantic Relationship Resources, which is page 6, so you can go back and take a listen to that if you feel so inclined. So I feel like this is almost building off of that and or adding to that.
Mm-hmm.
But just healthy intimate relationships, perhaps, or what makes a healthy intimate relationship is maybe the theme of this episode or this page. Perhaps. We'll see how it goes. We again, the last one and this one are more just kind of like talking episodes. We don't have my Google Doc framework that I like to have sometimes, so we'll just kind of like start and see how it goes. But this episode was initially born out of it being our 4th wedding anniversary last week.
Mm-hmm. We've
been together for almost 12 years, lived together for 10, married for 4. And interestingly, around that same time, so you've been recently listening to a podcast on YouTube that I believe is called Soft White Underbelly. Is that correct?
It's not a podcast. It's
like interview segments and series.
Yeah.
So interestingly, around the time of our anniversary, you listened to a Soft White Underbelly episode where the guy interviewed a divorce lawyer. Mm-hmm. And you were sort of telling me a little bit about that episode. In fact, on the day of our anniversary, you were telling me about that episode and just telling me some fun facts you had learned from that. And how we sort of came to deciding to record this episode. So what we did for our anniversary this year, it was on a Thursday. I worked during the day. I came home from work. You also worked during the day that day. We decided we were going to go for a climb, and then we ordered momos, which is equally as fun to say as it is delicious, which is Tibetan food for anybody that doesn't know.
Yeah.
And so we left. We were walking to the climbing gym. We had ordered our momos in advance from Uber to get them delivered here by a certain time from when we got home. And on the way walking to the climbing gym, you had asked me why I thought that 12 years in total, 4 years married, why we were making it. Like, what made our relationship special compared to some of the stats that you had heard in this divorce lawyer episode, considering the amount of people that get divorced or separated. What you had posed me the question of what I thought made us work. And so that's sort of what this episode, I think, was born out of. And then even more interestingly, the divorce lawyer that you were listening to on Soft White Underbelly, his name is James Sexton. We talk about a lot of resources and podcasts that we're big fans of on here. Another one that I don't think we've brought up that many times is Lex Friedman. And interestingly, when you got home from work this evening, James Sexton was just interviewed on Lex Friedman's podcast yesterday,
Yeah.
or it was posted yesterday anyways. So it was just sort of this synergistic, energetic, like, you know what, tonight's night to do it.
Yeah, I suppose so. Like the Soft White Underbelly, it's a channel where there's this guy, the guy that runs it. I think his name is Chris, but he's like in his 50s or late 50s, and he had a successful advertising career, and basically I don't think he has to like work anymore, but he wanted to still do something with his life, so he's basically created a channel where he interviews people that don't have most of them like don't have a voice, and they've been forgotten by society. So there's tons of it's like really based in Skid Row.
I was gonna say he started interviewing people on Skid Row.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
in LA. So basically just letting people tell their story on his channel. He's not really asking too many questions. Like he tries to basically set the table for them and then let them tell their story. So there'll be like, tons of addicts and meth and fentanyl, and then, prostitutes
Criminals.
and pimps, and then he'll get away from Skid Row as well and get into like a divorce lawyer or an ex mob hitman, or ex like Aryan Brothers Union, Aryan Brotherhood members and things like that. So just letting people tell their story, and as you watch, you start to really see themes in a lot of like these cases when it comes to like addicts or people who are homeless. Like, you get to see a lot of commonalities and themes where it's like, oh, okay, I see maybe where this has started. But anyways, that's a great channel. It's very interesting to watch, Soft White Underbelly. But this guy, James Sexton, the divorce lawyer, he was on, I think it was a few months ago. But I just watched it recently. And then, yesterday, he popped up again on Lex Friedman's, and I think he has a book coming out as well. But it's really interesting stuff, and he's seen some shit, and he's got a lot of great analogies that I've already stolen from him.
He's got Better Call Saul vibes for sure.
Yes.
In like the best way.
Yeah. And that quote from
Jesse
Breaking
Pinkman.
Bad, I'll tweak the quote a little bit, but it's like when you're going through a divorce, you don't want a criminal lawyer, you want a criminal lawyer.
Yeah.
And he's kind of got a little bit of those vibes. He's got like sleeve tattoos, but just pretty clean cut besides that. So yeah, a little bit of maybe perhaps the universe just showing little signs of like, perhaps you talk about this.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And maybe just to clarify, like, what I personally, and I'll speak for you, what we don't want this to be is a look at us, like this is how you have a successful relationship, because we certainly
jinx it immediately.
We certainly have our share of things to work through like anybody else, any other individual or anybody else in a relationship. And I was thinking about this was years ago. When I was going to respiratory therapy school, and I would walk home most days because the TTC, which is the transit system in Toronto, is awful. It would usually take me about 45 or 50 minutes to walk home, and usually an hour plus if I was to take TTC. So I would just walk home most of the time. And this one day I was walking home around the King and Strawn area, if you know West End Toronto, and there used to be a motel of sorts, I guess there. I think it's been bought and sold to like a condo company or something like that now.
Was it like the King's Arms or something?
Honestly, I don't remember the name. I just remember the sign out front that you could rent rooms by the hour, which is always indicative of maybe what's happening.
I only
there.
need like 4 minutes.
Which we'll talk about later in the episode about a successful relationship.
That's why you're singling me out here.
But either way, and like Parkdale, and there's parts of West End Toronto in particular that just, I mean, for anyone that doesn't know Toronto, Parkdale used to be like a very low socioeconomic, subsidized housing area of Toronto. It's changed over the years, but there's still glimmers. I mean, like
Oh yeah, big
there's
time.
there's homeless people just from having lived here for so long that like I recognize. I wave at them as I go by. And anyways, outside of this hotel that I was walking by, or this motel, there was a homeless man that I recognized. Used to walk by him a few times a week. And as I was walking by, he asked if I had change, and I said, "Oh no, sorry, I didn't." Kept walking. When I was maybe like 10 feet away from him, he just yelled at me down the street and was just like, "You could be me any day," and was like all angry and ranting and raving. And that always kind of stuck with me, where I was like, you know what, I could be him any day. Like any of us could be that homeless man any day. Like any of us could go from homeless to, or homed, or housed I should say, to homeless, or like healthy to unhealthy, or in this case happily married to divorced or widowed, quite frankly. So what I'll speak on behalf of half of both of us, what we don't want this to be is just like, we've got it figured out so far in our 30s, like this is what you have to do to be happily married. It's not that, but just themes of maybe things that we've learned so far over 4 years married, 10 years cohabitating, 12 years together. And
that kind of goes with everything with this podcast of like, yes, doing our best to pass along information that we didn't create, or like we hope that there's thousands of other podcasts and YouTube channels that are doing the same thing.
Oh, that's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's... Are we doing some things right? And am I happy with our relationship? Absolutely. But, yeah, there'll be storms ahead. There was storms in the past. And I think that's what every person deserves in life, is love, and not just from their parents or their children, but
or their dog.
Certainly not their fucking cat. But from a romantic love. And because that's where you go for it. That's where you're going for it. And by it I mean, well, do you have that quote?
I do. Before we started recording this, and why I started crying is we've watched the first 28 minutes of this James Sexton episode on Lex Friedman, and one of the things he says is, to love anything is insane because you're accepting you're going to lose it. In the case of having a romantic relationship with a partner, and he says exactly this: when you commit to like loving somebody fully in a romantic relationship, you're gonna lose them eventually, because they're either gonna die or you're gonna get divorced. So by like fully accepting and loving somebody, you are really setting yourself up for the greatest pain, knowing that ultimately you will lose them. Could be a couple years from now, could be 60 years from now. But if you're committing to loving something that you know that ultimately you will lose, why not just go all fucking in while it lasts?
And I think it's important to clarify, he was saying those things, but he was talking about it in a positive way, being like, so he's seen so much divorce and like weaponized intimacy is something that he says, but he's still like, yeah, like that's what it's all about, is going for it in a game that you're not winning. You're not winning the game of life. I mean, when it comes to getting out of it alive, right? So if you're gonna end up at the same spot no matter what, whether that's somebody who's completely like shut off and shut everybody else out, they're gonna end up dead just the same way you are. isn't it better to enjoy the ride then? Because the greatest pain, I don't think, is losing your loved one, your wife or your husband or your partner. I think that might be the second greatest pain. And the first one is not going for it your entire life and then having that realization that it's too late. And I think that is not number one, and number two, I don't think they're fucking close at all. I think number one is way worse. And I think that's kind of what you have to consciously think about that, of like, okay, yeah, no, do I want to get hurt? Most people no. Some people get a little freaky and like to get hurt. But most people no. So how can I not get hurt? Well, I'll just stay away and I'll settle for a connection, but I won't open up to love, because I don't want to get hurt. It's like, well, you're actually taking away all this good stuff, and then you're going to end up right at that same spot anyways. It's like, oh, great, you'll leave a beautiful corpse.
The escalator analogy, if you'd like to share.
Yeah. I think, escalator or conveyor belt. I like to use the conveyor belts. Because
we're going for a more industrial theme today.
So if you think about these two conveyor belts side by side, one of them, if you get on this conveyor belt, you're like, no, I got hurt once, I'm shutting down, I'm not opening up again, I'm going to ride this out because I don't want to feel that again, it's not worth it. And then the other conveyor belt is going for it. They're leading with their heart, they're loving, they're leading with love, they're not waiting for somebody else to do it first. And like, you're putting yourself out there, you're giving your partner, you're basically like, okay, so here's where I keep the bombs and the guns, and please don't hurt me here or there. Like, you're giving them all this info and all the weapons to hurt you, but you're trusting that they won't. And that's the other conveyor belt. And those conveyor belts, they just meet at a fork and then drop off a cliff. They both go to the same spot, but one of them, the quality of life is immensely better, right?
Right.
But it's understandable why the other conveyor belt looks tempting, why the quote unquote safe, no pain conveyor belt looks tempting. But it goes to the same fucking spot.
Right. Well, maybe we could go back to the original question that you asked me on our anniversary, which is, why do you think we've been successful so far, but what are things that you feel help to make a successful relationship? Successful meaning, this is another great thing he said in this interview so far, James Sexton, of just like, the determining factor of success shouldn't be longevity. Like, if you've been married for 40 years but you were miserable for 35 of them, like, that shouldn't be the goal of like, yeah, but we really persevered and we stuck through, and now we're both dying, but we made it 40 years. It should be like, what are those 40 years filled with? So what are some of the qualities that you think make up a successful relationship in the context of happiness and feeling like the ultimate love?
Yeah, because I think define like, what do you mean by successful relationship, right? Is a successful relationship one that you had kids and that your kids are now adults and you had like a house? Or is this a successful relationship where you got married and you stayed together forever? Or is a successful relationship one that you both have moments of, sadness and unhappiness or frustration, but it's overall you're both feeling like you're loved and your needs are met, you feel connected, you have a good sense of variety, you're growing together, you love each other. And I think then you have to define love. Like, You just keep going like a little bit deeper and deeper, but maybe it's good to start. What is a successful relationship or a successful marriage or a successful partnership?
I think a successful partnership is, having your needs met for sure.
The 6 needs.
Yeah. Having your 6 human needs met.
Yeah.
To feel that like ultimate love, like how do you describe love? I don't know. Again, I didn't prepare my Google Doc for this episode, but I think it's just something you know it when you feel it, to feel like safe with somebody, to be like your true self with somebody, to feel like you're able to fail and be supported and also like grow together.
Because like when you first meet someone or get into a relationship, there is that saying of love at first sight, but I don't know if that's that's how guys' brains work. Like, I love her, oh my god. But or the other way around, women typically rate looks, I think, 3rd or 4th on the list as order of importance, where guys are number 1. But I think love kind of starts the same way that you would start a fire, which is you gather sticks.
That's the man's job. Honey, look at how many sticks I've gathered.
Right? No, and by that I mean like it's kind of making sure you're in a right spot to even light a fire, and by that being you. It's like, okay, I have these waterlogged sticks, and it's windy as hell out here, and it's rainy, and this whole surface is just in a puddle.
We're in a bog,
and I think that that's kind of like your own state and where you're at with your own your relationship with yourself, I guess, right? So it's like, do you have a good place to start a fire? And then when you meet somebody who's also maybe in it for the right reasons, which can be hard to find these days if you're doing it all online, because it's such, just meat market and easy to have numerous people talking to numerous people all at the same time, because of just the virtual side of it and the dating apps. But going back to that fire analogy, it's like, okay, so you have this little spark, this little smoke, and then you fan it, you feed it, you meet each other's needs, you learn their love languages, what are their top love languages, so they feel loved and that you can feel loved, and you feel like you're growing together. And then you start, then you have a raging fire that you keep, if you just forget about it, it's going to go out, right?
Well, until the wind comes, and then it really tests it, or until it starts to rain a little bit, and it gets a little bit...
Well, wind is good for fires. You've obviously never really started one. But yes, like the realizing, okay, great, we have a fire, that work ain't done. You still got to go back and check on it every 20-30 minutes.
Gather more sticks.
Gather more logs and sticks, and have diesel on standby. Right? If the wife gets out of line, you go visit the garage and grab some diesel. And that's where, analogies are fun, and I think it illustrates that point a little bit, but then using those tools of okay, how's your variety these days? How much variety are you getting? Am I meeting your need for variety? How connected are you feeling? How much growth are we having as a couple, or have we been stagnant for 10 years now?
And feeling safe to have those conversations. First of all, knowing about your needs, your partner's needs, learning about the love languages. And again, we don't have to recap that too much. You can go back to page 6 about romantic relationship resources. But learning for yourself your needs, your love language, learning about your partner's needs and love language, and then not being scared to ask questions when you think something is off, or you think those needs might not be being met, or you realize that you and your partner have different love languages and perhaps you need to give a little, get a little, you need to compromise somewhere in between to
Perhaps,
help meet those, right?
Adapting and incorporating some ways so that they can feel it.
Right. Like
Right.
if my top need is gift giving and physical touch is
Or
my
your top
bottom
language.
need, my
Yeah.
top language,
Yeah.
sorry. If my top need is gift giving and quality time is the bottom, those aren't my actual love languages. Gift giving is my absolute bottom by a long shot, but I'm just using an example.
If you receive love, like
Receive.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If I
yeah.
receive love, because that's another good point to bring up, is you can give and receive love languages in different, like your top giving might be different than your top receiving.
Yeah.
So being aware of that as well. But I'll use my actual example. Like if quality time and followed by physical touch are probably my top 2 ways I like to receive. But how you give is not those things at all. That would require work from you as my partner to be like, you know what, I gotta open up a little bit to physical touch. I have to maybe work on putting my arm around my wife while we're sitting on the couch, or I need to work, like I need to carve out specific time when I'm at home, spend less time on my phone, spend less time on my laptop, and I need to specifically have these 2 hours where I'm going to have intentional quality time. But that takes doing some inventory, again, for yourself and your partner.
And your partner has to express it as well.
Right.
Because if neither of you is expressing anything,
Yeah.
and then your relationship just turns into a ship.
Right.
And you're like, okay, let's keep the ship going. And that's the goal, is just to keep the ship running. I can, picture those 2 conveyor belts again, right? So to keep the relations in the relationship, yeah.
And that is another thing that this James Sexton has talked about in this episode so far is, if you're choosing a partner in a monogamous relationship, and you can't be candid with that person about your needs, then what are you doing? Like, if you can't go for it with that person in this construct of monogamy, which honestly is challenged these days, like there's way less people. This isn't like 1936 where there's a lot less religious ties perhaps to marriage and monogamy. There's way more people that are open to polyamory, or not moving in with a partner, or just having different relationship constructs in general.
The world's more open
100%
with everything, with internet, social media, and then just obviously the pretty rapid decline in religion in a lot of people in North America, at least. I think perhaps maybe just like Australia and North America, that those could be huge declines in people that follow specific religions or believe in specific religions.
Right.
So, and even just finish high school, I'll marry my high school sweetheart, I'll get a job in town, I'll get a house for $8,000, and then that's it, right? So our view of how you can live life has expanded, and that applies to relationships as well, right? So people are not getting married as often, and they're seeing, and people aren't buying houses as often for different or maybe similar reasons, but just we don't have to immediately follow this outline.
Now, with that being said, so if you are choosing a partner, like a monogamous partner to settle down and do life with, if you can't be candid and open with that partner about your wants, your desires, as freaky as your desires are, sexual preferences, what you want out of life, goals, like all of that, then what's the point?
What are you doing?
You don't have to anymore. There's no like heavy religious ties, or like society doesn't necessarily say like this is something you must do. We're so much more open and expanded to that. So if not with that person that you've chosen, then why not? And then with who?
Yeah. Those are some of the deeper questions, right? Get to the bottom of the lily pad, get all the way down to the bottom of the pond, trace the stem down.
Right. So back to my original question that you posed to me on our anniversary. What are a quality, some qualities, a few things that you think are important to help create a successful partnership? And by successful,
for us at least.
Yeah, for us. And if other people take something from that, great. I'm sure, lots of people in quote unquote successful relationships might have similar, I'm sure there's similar themes.
Yeah.
So what might some of those themes be?
I thought you were answering the question.
No, I asked you the question. I'm saying.
I know. I asked you the question when. Yeah. So you were asking me a question.
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge there's going to be a little bit of a disconnect in this part of the recording, because the first half an hour or so of this we actually recorded maybe like a week and a half to 2 weeks ago almost, and now we're picking back up where we left off, whereas typically how we record these things is just all the way through. I think there might have been one page or episode so far where we cut out like a quick minute, like maybe I had to go pee or something like that and we had to stop and restart, but typically our format is we just talk and away we go. But hilariously enough and ironically enough, the reason we took a break is because in the middle of talking about page 14, which is all about success in relationships, we actually had an argument in the middle of recording. And no shame in bringing that up, because I think that's just like raw and real. And again, while we're two people here on the internet talking about this stuff, like we're not absolved from having our own arguments and disagreements too. And while it disrupted a little bit of the flow of how we normally record, sometimes you just got to take a step back and take a pause and then practice some good communication to work through it and start again.
Yeah. I don't know if it's been 10 days since that.
Yeah, I think it's been... Well, we started... Our anniversary was September 14th, and I know we started recording a few days after that. And now it's the end of September 28th today.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like a week and a half, 2 weeks.
And we haven't been upset with each other for...
I've been raging for 2 full weeks, and this is the first time we're sitting in a room again together. So you should definitely listen to what we're saying.
She's lying.
No, it was all good, like immediately after, within like half an hour. But
yeah,
it's important to acknowledge.
Basically, there was misunderstanding. I thought that she was going to be answering a question, kind of talking about it and almost in the third person. So I was caught off guard, and then I was a little dickish, but we cut that part out.
Yeah, we're going to cut out the dick moment. No, it's all good.
Yeah, so...
Well, I'll go back to, because we did just briefly listen to sort of where we left off, dickish moment and all. But we'll go back to the question that I had posed, which is, I think this is where the confusion came in. I was basically just trying to reiterate to you the question that you had asked me on our anniversary, which is why I thought we were quote unquote successful so far, I guess, in our relationship, meaning that we like have a fairly loving, happy relationship that I think we both have satisfaction in. And so what are the qualities that make that up? And so I wanted to pose the question back to you to see what your answer is.
And that is what led us to to shut down for an hour or so.
You always reword questions. You never listen to me. Go back and listen to page 6 on romantic relationship resources for absolutes. But now that you've had a good week and a half to think about it, boy, I hope you have a good answer.
See, the problem's communication. Too much communication. No, yeah, I guess it kind of caught me, not off guard, but just like, I had to think about it a little bit. Because I like going in, I guess, second, where I can analyze a little bit and kind of think and then phrase my response. So now that I've had some time to think quietly, I would say that your romantic partner doesn't have to be your only best friend, but it would be a very great thing if they were one of your best friends. And by that I mean you get to enjoy your time with them, and when it's not just based around, sharing a dwelling together or sex or romance or sexual attraction and any of that stuff, but it can be that, of course, along with you actually have the most fun with this person, and they bring the best out of you. They believe in you and demand that you do your best or inspire you to do your best.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
That's a nice answer. That's a better answer than a week and a half ago.
Yeah, no, top that.
While also having had some time to reflect, I think what I answered, I know what I answered when you had asked me the question originally, was, I think, to have success in a romantic relationship, it requires patience and understanding towards your partner. And I still do stand by both of those things. However, having some more time to think about it, I think those two things kind of spawn off into letting go of the need to be right in your partnership. So, I mean, having patience for your partner's little quirks, like we all have our little quirks, right? There's things about you and your partner that will inevitably change in like a long-term relationship, but people still are who they are. So you have to have the patience for who that person is and the uniqueness of sort of like what draws you to them in the first place, and understanding for, if they fuck up, but also if they're having like a bad day and like not taking on those bad days personally, or like if something, just like understanding for their situation and their day and looking outside of yourself. But when I say letting go of the need to be right, I mean, I can think of recently, like, again, I would say this was before our anniversary, but within the last month for sure. I was on my way home from work, and typically when I leave work, I will call you to let you know I'm on my way home so you can fiddle around and do your little things that you have to do in the apartment before I get home. And we had this conversation where I was sort of like irritated about something that hadn't transpired during the day that I thought that you were going to take care of. And conversation was fine. I came home, but I was like stewing about it on my way home. And because you are my best friend and you know me so well, as soon as I came in the door, you could tell that I was like irritated about this thing without me even saying anything. And then I think my irritation led to you becoming like a little bit defensive of like, oh great, this is how we're going to start our night. Not that you said that, but again, the sense that I kind of like got from you. And so instead of like feeding into the irritation and like stoking the fire and making things worse, I just sort of like took a minute, like took a couple deep breaths, came home, changed. And then instead of just being like, you know what really pissed me off on the way home, like just sort of like gently grabbed your hand and like was like, please sit down on the couch with me and like, let me explain to you why what has happened made me feel the way that I feel. And like, let's talk about that, right? All that's to say, instead of coming home and being like, you know what really pissed me off, and like, you know what, like, you're wrong, I'm right, and taking like that approach, I think it's so, yeah, it's just so much better to let go of the need to be right. And if it's somebody who truly is your best friend and somebody that you actually care about, just letting go of that need instead of, and having a greater goal of like, whatever this disagreement is, we can sort of like work it out together.
Well, let's say that you get into an argument and then you're like, great, you're right, feel better? No. Okay, so obviously that's not the way to do things. Right?
Which we've also learned how to do that. Do you feel better now?
Because it's not about that.
Of course not.
Right? There's a lot of stuff going on below the surface. So it's like, okay, yeah, this happened and I feel like this, but knowing myself and knowing, like, being able to analyze and figure out where this emotion or behavior is bubbled up from, it's also probably because of these other things that have been transpiring throughout my day. And to share them with your partner, and it's important to just, like the good thing that you did there was to not go on the offense, because when someone's on offense, guess what the other person has to do?
Defense.
yeah, right. So
it's NFL season, y'all.
So that's important. Of like, okay, I am just gonna not go onto the offense, and instead, I'm gonna lay the balls out into the middle of the court and being like, you want to go grab a ball? Go for it, but I'm also going to grab one. But if you choose not to grab one, then we can settle this like men. So that's, I think, what you're describing there is an understanding of yourself, and not just your partner, but like an understanding of yourself and why you're actually, feeling certain things, and be like, okay, do I need to make my partner wrong so I can feel better? Because you already know it's not going to make you feel better. It's going to make your partner feel like shit, and then and then the relationship won't feel any better. So it's really not what you're going for, is being right. So letting go, throwing that in the trash, throwing being right in the trash, and instead getting something way better.
Which really just relates back to the fire analogy, which I so loved from the start, of just like, knowing yourself, setting a good framework for yourself, good mental understanding of yourself, to then, flourish when you're also trying to mentally understand and have compassion for somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what if, maybe, did you have something else you wanted to add to that? Sorry.
Well, I didn't love your answer. My answer was... And
we're going to pause now again.
2-week hiatus now. My answer was all like, you wanted to be your best friend and she inspires you. And your answer was like, well, just because you're right, you don't have to make them feel like shit. And, it's like,
well, I think we can agree there's obviously like multiple things that add, like there is no perfect answer, right? We're just both sharing things that come to sort of like top of mind, and the patience and understanding, it was my genuine true answer when you asked me in real time on our anniversary. So I was just sort of elaborating off of that a bit. But Newsflash, there is no right answer. Like it's
Well,
a
you're both
combination.
right.
Yeah, it
Great.
should be
So-
all of those things. It should be patience, understanding, having a best friend, working on yourself, not having to be right, and probably a dozen other things that we haven't covered.
Yeah. Because, your answer is really describing a good way to troubleshoot like negative emotions or feelings or like little arguments like that of like misunderstandings as well. To not go on that offense.
Right.
And realize why you want to go on that offense. Certainty, right? But when you go on offense, the other person's going to have to play defense, even if that's not like their desired action at that moment. The same way if you get into a road rage argument or something that you had no intention of doing, but because the other person was a dick or said something or put your car in danger of being hit, you immediately lash out on them.
Sometimes I just start humming louder and turn up the radio and carry on my merry way.
But that because you want to get beyond that. You're right. So
well, I'm glad we settled that.
Yeah.
So what if sorry, I'm having a stroke right now. I think we discussed this in another page as well, but sometimes while we're sitting here, you'll start like rubbing your knee, and I don't know if other people can hear it or not, but I can certainly hear it in the background, and then it distracts me. So what if you're like, okay, Jenna and John, so I'm doing my best. I'm like, physically feeling great. I've been going to therapy. I've been meditating. I feel like I'm the best version of myself. And like, I found the right environment to light this fire. And I just haven't found the right person. What do we do with that? How do we meet the right person?
Well, there's an aspect of luck, of course. But it's also just like getting into that casino and playing as well.
Right.
Right? You can't win if you don't play. If you don't buy a 50-50, you're certainly not going to win. And to realize that the numbers might not be in your favor when it comes to the online world.
Well,
it can be in your favor, absolutely. If you're going at it with the right intentions and you're finding people that are also going at it in the right intentions. If you're finding guys that are just in it to have, like, play the numbers game and to have a stable of women that they talk to and meet their needs through, literally just like people that they get to meet their needs through without having to actually commit to anything or one and to risk like loving fully. I think that's what can happen in the numbers game of online dating.
Yeah, and I mean, this was perhaps insinuated from when we talked about how long we've been together for at the start of this page, but how long we've been together for has preceded really online apps and like dating apps and online dating. So I don't know shit about online dating. Like, I've said this many times. I'm like, if we ever got divorced, I'm screwed. Like, I don't know how to meet people. I'm from the era of like, you meet people at parties, or you meet people at a bar, or you meet people, it's like a friend of a friend, or a friend of a friend of a friend, like meetings like that. So we really do have a lot of empathy for having to navigate this crazy, it sounds like crazy, like Grindr, Tinder, Bumble, Match, right? Where it does sound wild. Like I've asked this to some of my friends that are still single and still do try to meet partners through online dating. I'm like, so how do you start a conversation with someone? Because obviously going online and being like, hey, how you doing? Good, how are you? like, how do you even get past interesting interesting conversation when you don't have the like facial reactions, when you don't have like similar environment to talk about or similar friends to talk about, and it's so easy to just ghost somebody and like never respond to them at all. Like, how do you get to that next level?
It's a low barrier to entry, right?
So I can only imagine how challenging that is, and I do not have any tips or tricks for that.
Oh, actually, you do. You do, and you've already recorded a page on that, which is the words we speak. So when you're trying to get to know people, you don't say how. Unless you're asking exactly how to get to like a restaurant or a place, right? It's like, okay, so instead of saying like, how are you, like, how is it going, you can ask different questions. You can say different words so that you don't just get to like the main level of a house. You get to go up some floors. You get to go up some floors of the building, of the condo, where it's not all talking about the environment or what you do for work and, about just like surface level stuff.
Which, as a small aside, I think is in the realm of logical levels, which maybe we'll do another episode on. We don't have to veer off path from that too much, but in advance, everybody look up logical levels. But I don't know. I do agree with your statement of just like having to put yourself out there. Like, if you're the best version of yourself and you are ready to take on a relationship and like start dating, that just requires being vulnerable, and that is not an easy thing to do. But I can maybe we can tell the story of like how we met. Y'all know I already read my horoscope every day, so maybe this will be very fitting for how this starts, because while I'm not a believer in blind fate, I guess, like I don't believe like, I can just sit on my couch and great things will happen to me.
Yeah, like, so it's not like a universal fate where your whole life is planned out and things are going to happen no matter what.
That's not what I believe in. But I do believe in perhaps there's these like synchronicities or like perfect coincidences that perhaps lead you to a point where there's like fork in the road decisions to be made, and then from there you have the power that like perhaps the universe or whatever you want to call it leads you to these points based on decisions that you've made, and then it's like, all right, you take in the right path or the left path, and then you make a decision, and then from there other great things or not so great things can happen as a consequence of that. But which is kind of, I don't know, that resonates a little bit with just how sort of we met. But so we met through a mutual friend who I went to university with.
Aaron.
Not to name names. However, when we met, I was already graduated university, but another mutual friend was still living in Waterloo, which is where I went to university. It was his birthday, and so I was traveling back there with this university.
This is my friend
roommate. And this is a friend of yours
middle school, high school, basically. Yeah,
middle school, high school, and who I had lived with a few years in university. Should also preface this by saying that for the 4 years this friend and I lived together, we hosted multiple parties over the years. Oktoberfest is big in Waterloo. We'd have Ragers, St. Patrick's Day, New Year's parties, where of course you have your university friends from that town show up, but also like brothers, sisters, cousins, friends from home would also come up. And for all the parties that we hosted, you were never at any of those parties. You had never shown up to any of those events. So I decided to travel back to Waterloo for this other friend's birthday party, and you had also decided to travel up with some friends, and we met at this birthday party.
And it was late January?
Mid-January. Yeah, mid-January. And I actually wasn't going to go because
you were drinking the night before.
I had gone out the night before. I wasn't feeling great.
Yeah.
I, didn't know if I wanted to like get dressed up and make the road trip to do it. It sort of involved me like taking a bus and a train to get to your hometown to then meet up with this friend who was going to drive me the rest of the way. And I was just, it's dark, it's snowy. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. But
and I was leaning towards going, but it was really squirrely with the weather.
Yeah,
it was
wasn't a
a
great
literal
night.
snowstorm.
Yeah.
So we're like, shit, but I should probably not go. Like on the fence. But decided to be a 23 or 24-year-old male with no regard and drove anyways.
Yep.
And that's about an hour drive,
Plus.
an hour and a half drive or something.
Plus. And I was just also like, fuck it. I'm just going to go. I like to party, so let's do it. And anyways, all that's to say, we met at this birthday party and obviously have talked ever since and dated for a long time and got married. But it's just to say there's these perfect circumstances of these decisions you have to make. And sometimes even if you don't really want to do something, it's worth putting yourself out there because you don't know what might be missing if you don't go. I think that's the big thing to take away from that. I'm not saying when you're like dead exhausted after a night shift and it's unsafe and you're sick and stuff like that to do it, but sometimes I think, especially like for anybody single that's listening, one thing from our story, and honestly other people, when we were traveling in Panama this year, one of the couples that we stayed at their Airbnb and ended up having some drinks with one night, they had a very similar story of like this this perfect circumstance of like, it was New Year's, they had tickets to this event separately, they didn't know each other yet, the one got too drunk, went home, slept, was fully like, it was way past midnight.
It was like 4 a.m.
Yeah, and he was like, got these tickets, I might as well go, and ended up going and meeting his now long-term partner,
Yeah.
So, I'm sure lots of people have stories like that, but all that's to say, sometimes it's worth it to put yourself out of your comfort zone and do something that maybe you don't want to do because you're like, I don't really know anybody there, and I might be awkward, and I don't know what it's going to be like, so I don't even know if I'm going to have fun, so maybe it's just better if I don't go.
Yeah.
Like, it is worth it to put yourself out there, and you can't, to go back to your previous analogy, you can't hit the jackpot of the casino if you don't go to the casino.
Yeah, and to be able to differentiate between the mental chatter there. It's like when you're working out and let's say you're doing a bicep curl and it starts to burn, and then your brain's like, okay, now you're done. All right, you're done now. You're done. But your muscles are actually still good, but it's your brain and your mind trying to get you to stop because it doesn't want to go through the pain.
Right.
You're trying to shut that down and actually listen to the muscle in the body. When it's the muscle's actually done, then great, you're done. So the same thing with like, if you aren't feeling up to going to something, ask yourself like, okay, is it just my mind and my brain that are trying to like protect me here and let me stay safe in my my comfort zone, or is it that I actually do need like to stay home tonight? I need a little like self like me day and do some good like alignment or workout or just hang out by myself to listen to what's actually going on in your experience and what is just your mind trying to keep you in your comfort zone and protect you from being hurt, being vulnerable and almost the risk of being happy.
Right.
I'd rather be certain where I am, even if it's miserable, than the uncertainty of going out there and finding my pot of gold, because that's uncertain.
Right. Love that.
But it is absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
12
years later, and despite having to put out the podcast, it was worth it to go in that snowstorm to Waterloo. So yeah.
Okay.
Anything else you want to add?
No, that's a great place to finish.
That's a great place to end. So yeah, we love you guys. Thanks for sticking with us, and thanks for letting us be real with you, show you that we have arguments and disagreements too, and just thank you so much as always for listening.
Bye y'all.